Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of Carolyn Talks, the podcast slash YouTube channel where I, your host, Carolyn and I speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. In this episode, I speak to writer and director Celine Song about her first feature film, Past Lives, which has gotten amazing reviews. Everyone loves it. It premiered at Sundance in 2023, where I wasn't able to see it then, but I was able to see it afterwards because I was able to get in contact with the publicist and arrange an interview with Celine for joysauce.com. So this interview was originally recorded for that. So it's published in written format on joysauce.com, and it's an abridged version of this interview. So like everything that's in the written format, it doesn't have everything that's going to be mentioned here in this audio recording because some things would have been considered spoilers at that time because the film hadn't gotten its wide release. So we kind of cut some things out in the editing, and also we shortened it for length and clarification. So I love this film for many reasons, but one of the things that I really loved about this film is that I think it's not necessarily about romantic relationships between men and women. I think it's more about the bonds people create between male and female friendships, and the whole idea that people have that men and women can't be just friends. I think your film is about showing that men and women can be just friends, and that men who may have had romantic interest in, like, for instance, like Nora, I think like it shows that exes can have friendships with the new loves in their former loves' life. So talk to me a bit about coming up with this story and about making it about more than romantic relationships.
Well, I think that's actually so true, because I feel like romance doesn't have to only exist for people who end up dating and being together, because that's not the limit of our romantic life, actually. Because I feel like sometimes the romance can be like, like you go to a bookstore and you're like, it reminds you of another bookstore that you remember from your childhood, and you're like, how amazing that there's this bookstore around the corner that opened. How fortunate, or like how lucky that, or like you just go, like it's like it's like the restaurant that closed, it like reopens, and there's a romance in that too. Like I think it's like it is sometimes about places that you live too. And of course, when it comes to people, yes, absolutely, friendships. And it's also like sometimes you make eye contact with somebody who's in the street, and then you say, hey, and do I know you from somewhere? And then you realize that no, just that person just reminds you of someone else. And you're like, well, there's even romance in that. So I think romance can be like a part of like all our lives in such a in a way that doesn't have to be labeled by boyfriend, girlfriend, a partner. Like you don't need those things to really feel connected to other people in this way that is ineffable and completely magical too.
Do you think it has to do with using the word romance? And do you think it has to do with a lot of the modern context? The romance is strictly about like eros love, about the idea of romantic love being only about sexual relationships and sexual connections with each other. Whereas like back, you would say like the Shakespearean times, or even like in the 1800s and 1700s, romance was more about having a connection with either a person, or you can have, as you use the analogy of a bookstore, where you're like, you just feel comfortable in the space, you feel comfortable around people. And romance wasn't strictly about sexual love and sexual connections. It wasn't about having, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend. It was about, I feel romantically linked to like you have a soul bond. And do you think it's because a lot of people like have this hope of what romance is now, and that it's changed from the original meaning?
I completely agree with that, actually, because I feel like the romance used to be something that comes from Sturm and Drang, right? Like that idea of romance, that's where the word came from, which is this idea that it's so much more about time and space, right? And then kind of things that you cannot control or change, and the way that we as people are contending with it as heroes, right? That's really where the original idea of romance came. But of course, I think over time, because of the sexual or erotic love becoming a sort of center stage for when we talk about romance, I think it really shifted the thing. And I think it also has to do with the way that capitalism is a part of our romantic life that we have. The apps, or the way that we talk about dating, and you have a person, I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend. There's a kind of a thing where I think that capitalism has really infiltrated the way that we think about love and relationships, where it's like it is so much more about like, you know, attaining something, right? But I think that this movie, though, something that I really wanted this movie to be about is not about dating. I want it to be about love, right? I want it to be about the love that we feel for each other, no matter what kind of a possessory or what kind of a ownership, like that kind of a way that we sort of are trained to think about love, because you know, about dating, really more than love, that we kind of lose track of love, which is actually a fundamental part of romance. That's what romance is. And love isn't just something that you feel towards the person you're dating, right? Love is something you feel towards friends. You're right. From old acquaintances, sometimes you feel, I mean, of course you feel that about your family, right? So there is a kind of an amazing thing where these two friends love each other in this movie, right? But you cannot really talk about that as a dating thing because they never dated, right? But it doesn't mean that this love is not real. And it also doesn't mean that this love can only become real if they date, right? The love can exist, right? Exactly. Like love can exist without it having the erotic sexual consummation, because this love that endures through time and space, they know each other, right? They know each other even after decades. And to me, I'm like, if that's not love, I don't know what is. And it doesn't mean that they have to kiss or have sex for them to have the fullest version of itself. It's the fullest kind of love that can exist, because their love is pure. It's not ruined by anything. It's actually just something that happens over time and space. So, but I understand, like, the audience might feel like it's like, well, only way that love is real is kissing. But I think this movie hopefully is an argument about actually no, you know, like sometimes friendships or sometimes connections that are just connections, like, you know, and this is why I introduced the word inyan in it, right? There are just certain things in life that are not necessarily have to be consummated in a traditional way or in a way that we can all understand for it to be complete. So, and how amazing that Hae-sung flew 14 hours to be here to be able to move on from the possibility of this girl that he loved. So I think it's like there's amazing thing that can happen where it's like, it's, to me, I do think of it as a happy ending, but I think we can only think of it as a happy ending if we're willing to accept the idea of romance and love in a way that is original. Like that was the original fundamental way that we were talking about romance and love, right? And not this new like app kind of like, you know, dating.
The ending to me is a happy ending, because the thing about this film is I don't think it's necessarily about Nora. I think it's more about Hae-sung and him getting closure for himself. Because one of the things about this film that I think you do so smartly is to show how Nora, who starts out as Na-young when she's living in South Korea, she always leaves. She's the one who's always leaving Hae-sung behind. You know, when they're kids, she's immigrating with her family. She literally told him like the day before that they're moving, oh, by the way, I'm moving to a completely different continent. And he's like, huh? And she's just like, well, see you, bye. And he's just like left floundering. And she's a child, so she's not responsible for her parents' actions. And she doesn't understand the permanence of goodbye. You know, for her, it's just like she's moving on. She's just like, this is just the thing that I'm doing. But for him, he's literally left there on the steps, like, what just happened? You know?
Yes, totally.
Yeah. And then like as they're adults, like she's living in New York now, and he reconnects with her. And there's two things I want to talk about there, but then she leaves him again. When they're like, he's finally, I found this person that I thought so much about from my childhood, going through enlistment, becoming an adult, going through university and all this. She's always been at the back of his mind. And I think a lot of it is like, he never got that closure. He's just like, he's stuck on pause, you know, like their relationship for him is stuck on pause. He never got to say goodbye. Well, she's moved on from Canada to New York. And he finally reconnects with her. And she's like, oh, after we need to stop talking, you know, because I need to focus on writing this play. And he's once again left like, just like that.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, at the end of the film, I'm like, yes, Hae-sung, you get to walk away this time. And it's not
Yeah.
like he did, but it's just like, he's like, I get to have closure for me. He's
Yes.
just, I'm the one who doesn't get to walk away. I don't get left on pause. I
Yes.
don't get left wondering where I am, who am I, and what do I mean to you in your life. So talk about Hae-sung being the one to say, you know what? Bye.
I mean, I feel like you understand it so completely, and I feel like this is something that I feel like I don't always get to talk about, because I feel like people don't understand that it is Hae-sung who is driving this connection, right? Mm-hmm. He's the one who is looking for her. He's the one who is flying 14 hours to be there for her.
I went to Korea recently, so I know how it feels to be on that plane for 16 hours.
Of course,
that is dedication right there.
That is dedication right there. But he's doing that because I know it is so long and horrible. And the thing is, like, he really is there because he needs this for himself, right? Like, he's not going there for her almost, right? He's going there for himself because he knows that they're owed a proper goodbye, because he didn't get a proper goodbye. And I think that really haunted him. And I think he really wants to say goodbye so that he can move on. So, for example, in the final scene of the film where he is in the car, and the actor Teo asked me what kind of expression he needs to have when he's in the car being driven away in the final scene. I was like, well, he needs to look, first of all, tired because he's been up all night. But secondly, he needs to feel at peace, right? He needs to be he needs to be happy. He needs to be glad that he flew 14 hours to 16 hours to be here so that he can move on with his life, right? And he got what he came here to get, right? Which is closure, right? So I think he's just so happy, honestly, that he just got to move on, and I think in the meantime, I don't think Nora knew that she needed to move on until Hae-sung came, because then she was somebody who was moving. So I don't think that she knew that she needed to say goodbye to the little girl that she left behind. But then, of course, Hae-sung flew 14 hours to be here to remind her that she never got to say goodbye to that little girl that she left behind, right? So when we actually see the two of them saying goodbye in the scene at the end, and then we flash back to childhood, it's in the dark. I don't know if you noticed this, but it's in the dark because it's meant to imply that there has to be this moment in childhood, right? They're getting the goodbye that they were owed 24 years ago, right? And they're getting the goodbye now because they were too young to do it properly. They tried when they were a little older, but they couldn't do it either. So they're two bad goodbyes in the movie where they doesn't totally work. And then the final goodbye, which is the good goodbye, because they actually get to do it. They actually get to say goodbye, right? Only after that, right? And only after they've been able to say the goodbye that they were owed, only then can Nora cry, right? Because then actually Nora can cry because she's actually grieving. She gets to have a moment of grief where she gets to say goodbye to that little girl that she never got to say goodbye to. And the gift that Hae-sung gives her, right? And this is why he's doing his arc is the heroic arc, right? Which is that, like, he is the one who is giving her, and also by extension Arthur as well, a chance to say goodbye to that little girl, and also to say hello, right? To sort of also meet that little girl and then to say goodbye. So I think there's something complete about, and you're right, Hae-sung gets to walk away for the final time, and that's how you know that it is a proper goodbye, right?
Yeah.
Only when both sides are able to walk away, right? And the truth is, Nora got to walk away when she was a kid, right? And then only 24 years later is Hae-sung able to walk away. And then once both have walked away, that's a proper goodbye,
right?
And the movie can end.
Yeah, it's not only a goodbye, but I think it's a resolution, because like you mentioned, them saying goodbye as kids in the dark when it close to the end. In the beginning where Na-young and Hae-sung they're parting, like he's kind of left in the dark, like his side of the stairs. Because one thing about Korea, there's so many stairs, so many steps.
Yes.
Like when she's going, her side is like lit, you know, it's more brightly lit, and his side is kind of like shadowy and like, because he's on pause again, there in the dark. And then she wasn't even looking for him, you know, she was just like playing on like Facebook, possibly looking for her old schoolmates, and she couldn't even remember his name. It was her mom who remembered Hae-sung's name, you know, and that kind of shows, well, he remembered everything about her, but it kind of shows her mentality, where she was kind of like, her life wasn't really focused on him, but he still remembered every detail about her. But again, in those scenes, Hae-sung is sitting in the dark in front of his laptop using Skype, RIP Skype. And she is, and she's lit up, you know, like her room is more brightly lit. And then there's
the dawn happens.
The dawn happens.
There's dawn, and on Hae-sung's side there's dusk.
Yes.
Right, the sun is setting, so you're seeing the light change like that. So there's change, but it's in a different way. And of course, she knows that she's going to get on a bus and go to the artist residency, right? Yes. So she's moving on again, right? Yeah.
And then there's this scene where after they reconnect on Skype, she's walking down. I love this single shot. Like she's walking down the street, and she's not walking in the shadow or the light. She's literally walking on the margin of both. And it kind of shows where, as a character, Nora she hasn't really found her place. And I think a lot, to me, as being an immigrant myself, I think a lot of that has to do with, like you talked about, saying goodbye to herself as a little girl. But I think she herself still hadn't really found her place as an immigrant, you know, and she still was still kind of like disconnected from her South Korean heritage. And she's still, one of the things about this story is very much an immigrant story. And but you play it very subtly, and she kind of disconnects from her South Korean heritage. Like we don't really get to hear her say anything much about her parents. You know, she only speaks Korean in her sleep. You know, she wears shoes inside the house. I was like, full assimilation. So I'm like, that's
where she never does that.
No, when she goes into the artist residence, she wears the shoes inside the house.
Of course, but it's not a Korean space, right?
True, I guess.
That ground is dirty. That ground is dirty. You know exactly. Yeah.
But talk about how this film also talks about her, as you said, reconnecting with her childhood, and she's saying goodbye to that little girl that she was with Hae-sung. But I think this is also a beginning of her perhaps learning to reconnect with who she is now, and like it's a beginning. You know,
exactly. It is both a goodbye and a hello.
Somebody's beginning.
Exactly. It is definitely a goodbye and a hello, just like all goodbyes, right? I think it is going to be, of course, the beginning of something, right? And also it's something that's happening in her marriage to this guy too. He gets to see her as this kid who's a crybaby, right? That's new. And I think it's like, and I think to me, I'm like, well, that's a new part of their relationship, which they can be like, they're having the conversation in the bedroom because Hae-sung is in town, right? So part of what Hae-sung is giving them is also like, Hae-sung has, it's also a gift for Arthur too, as in like he gets to, by sort of like allowing Nora to sort of like actually let the other parts of her life be a part of her life, right? She is becoming more complete in some way, right, as a person, right? And part of that is like, that is such an amazing thing that like Arthur is smart enough to recognize, which is why Arthur says to Hae-sung, it was the right thing to do. I'm glad you came here, right? Because he knows that it is also a gift. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It is. And I think it's like, so we're gonna wrap it up. But I think one of the things about this film is also, like we talked at the beginning about romance and, you know, romantic relationships. And a lot of people could look at this their relationship as almost a way for Arthur to be jealous. But I don't think he was jealous at all. I think he was just like, wait, this guy is opening up a whole new side of my wife that I never got to see. You know, he's getting to see her speak fluently in Korean. You know, he's getting to see her communicate with another South Korean person in a way that he wasn't able to see her do before.
Yeah.
So I think this film is also a way of showing people about how you can be tolerant and also just being accepting, and everything doesn't have to be about jealousy.
Of course.
This is a new side of my wife. I get to experience her fully now for the first time.
It can be about the generosity of spirit, right? It can be generous, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
exactly.
So we're finished now. I wish we had more time. I have so
I know, of course.
many
This was such a great conversation. Thank you for this conversation.